Martina, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
You're welcome.
Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I currently work as a user experience researcher for a monitoring observability company. My background is also in cybersecurity, and I wrote a book on fraud psychology, what scammers do to persuade us, how they use persuasion to, get us to comply with phishing emails or other scams and frauds. So yeah, I am passionate about fraud prevention and really kind of telling victims that they shouldn't be silent when that happens.
That's great. So, what got you into fraud prevention?
Yeah, like I was doing my PhD and I was really interested in doing cognitive bias called the Barnum effect. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's really a cognitive bias that a lot of fake clairvoyants use, where you tell people something that it's applicable to anybody in general public, and then it seems very true of you, right? And that's how you build trust. So anything
Mhm.
you say afterwards will sound very, very kind of amazingly true, right? And also, as people, we like to hear positive things about ourselves. So the more flattery that the person can give you, the more you're gonna feel good about them and trust. So I was really interested in that cognitive bias, and I wanted to do something with it. And it was really difficult to find. An application in the real world apart from it's interesting, and I had a lot of months when I was just mulling over how to apply that, and then I read this really interesting article about how scammers use psychology in phishing emails, and I just had a kind of like an idea. Yeah, like actually, this could be something I could apply to, and I could test, and I could kind of go down that route. And that's what I did. And interestingly, the two people that wrote that paper were the first two people that quoted my book as
Oh, that's
well.
awesome.
So I came full circle on that. So.
That's really cool. Before we get into this, one of the things that I like to ask my guests to destigmatize what it means to be a target or a victim of fraud and help people to open up and talk about their experience. Have you ever been a victim of a scam or fraud?
Yeah, I actually was still, I walked into my PhD thinking, well, people who get scammed are gullible. And, first of all, I want to say that through the interviews with some of the scam victims, I realized that that's not always the case, right? Sure, sometimes people don't pay attention and they don't check details, but sometimes they do and they still get scammed. It
Hmm.
just depends how smart the scammer is. So one of the things that happened to me in terms of the scam, I was buying a mobile phone. I had a lot of money in my PayPal. I think I sold some stuff, some old stuff, and I had a lot of like money in my PayPal. And I thought, well, I need a new phone. I'm going to buy it on eBay and I'll just use my balance. And I ended up purchasing a phone which was like, was supposed to be new in box. And I didn't really think twice about it, right? Like it was advertised, I purchased it. And when it didn't arrive, I immediately knew something bad has happened. And I emailed the person who sold it to me, and I didn't get a reply. And uh, and then I started investigating. I opened the case, and eventually eBay gave me the money back. So it wasn't even that exciting or traumatizing or anything like that. But the feeling that you get when somebody deceives you,
Yeah.
it's just awful. So I ended up like really looking into this seller, and there seemed to be a legitimate person on eBay. So I don't know if they got hacked or they just thought, well, I'm just going on a scamming spree. But like they even had people come to the house to pick up things. So I don't know what happened, but that night they had several phones listed for sale.
Hmm.
And then I would just blame myself, like you do. I should have checked what else they're selling, and maybe they would have given me a clue. And people tend to do that. They tend to immediately think, well, I shouldn't have been this stupid. And I think that stops them and prevents them from going to the police or maybe reporting it or even sharing their experience because, people can be unkind,
Yeah.
and truthfully, while I was doing my research, I actually found a factor in my scale that I developed for fraud vulnerability. One of the factors is actually uh, something I call belief in justice. And it was comprised of things that people believe it wouldn't happen to them.
Hmm.
People believe that police would solve that problem if it happened to them. And people believe this happens to other people, right, who are gullible, and that's not them. And I think, all of us to some degree want to believe that about ourselves. And I think that's, you can't really control a lot of your environment,
Hmm.
what happens to you. And if a scammer is very good, if they can spoof an email, there's literally no way of telling whether it's a scam or legitimate email. So, you know, it was a good experience on understanding how much anger and how much disappointment and self-blame comes through just a simple scam, let
Yeah.
alone more complicated one.
Yeah, but it's interesting because even if you buy a legitimate product and it doesn't turn out to be exactly what you wanted, you still feel kind of that emotional,
Yeah,
gosh darn it, they took advantage of me and I didn't get what I wanted. So all the
yeah.
more so when someone has really done something despicable.
Mm.
I'm really
True.
curious. The can we talk about the fraud vulnerability factors?
Yeah, sure. So as a part of my PhD, I developed a measure, and it was the first of its kind in terms of that it was targeted at scams specifically, and frauds and kind of like and so I came up with 5 factors. The first one was compliance. The second one was impulsivity. The third one was decision time. The fourth one was vigilance, and the fifth one was that belief in justice. Right? If we believe that like world is a just
Hmm.
place, and that's a cognitive bias as well, right? We believe that the world is just because we need to be able to feel like we have control over it. And you'll see that a lot with certain scam, like with certain victims and scam victims in particular, but also with victims of sexual violence. If we can explain why that happened to them, then we feel better because if we don't do those things, we wouldn't be a victim, which is like an illusion of control,
Yeah.
really. But yeah, basically compliance is mostly when people may even understand that something's not right, but they are just unable to say no.
Hmm.
They kind of go along with it because they're just maybe not strong enough to stand up and say no. Impulsivity, self-explanatory. People that just kind of like impulsively do things, that maybe not really thinking through it. Decision time, it's kind of opposite of impulsivity, is that people who actually take the time to make decisions and rationalize a little bit are more protected, and people that are more vigilant, that maybe read like terms and conditions, that
Hmm.
dive into details, would be a little bit more protected.
And vigilance.
Oh, well, vigilance is basically the same. Like you kind of like a
Okay.
little bit more cynical. You may not believe everything people tell you, so you double check and so on.
So about the compliance one, is this kind
Yeah.
of people who like to follow rules and processes?
Um, I think people who are more compliant, it's complicated. It's not either or,
Hmm.
it's kind of like a scale. So it's a spectrum. But in terms of the scams, those are usually the people that, find it hard to say no. I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of scammers do bargain on that, especially, in the olden days, scammers would just go door to door,
Yeah.
right? And, like that is more kind of more important when somebody actually you're in a face-to-face like face-to-face
Hmm.
situation, or sometimes in a longitudinal like longer term scam, like now we have pig butchering scams that go on for a while, or romance scams where actually a scammer may be putting pressure on you and you're
Hmm.
just going to find it really difficult to say no. So stuff like that, stuff where you actually go along with stuff because you're just uncomfortable being more assertive and so on. But yeah, definitely somebody who follows rules a little bit more. There's definitely a persuasion technique called authority,
Hmm.
is that and people who believe in authority are a little bit more likely to fall for that because they just have more of a kind of like more of a impulse to follow rules and to be respectful and
Hmm.
and not question authority figures, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So on the justice one, are you saying that people who have a worldview more of there's justice in the world, and if someone does bad, someone will catch them, versus someone who's it's just a free for all, and I've got to watch out for myself?
Yeah, like I mean, belief in justice as a cognitive bias is literally people try and finding justifications for why things happen.
Hmm.
And like when you hear people say karma will get you, right? That's not always true. Bad things happen to good people, and nothing happens to bad people because they've
Yeah.
done that. So it's kind of like, but it's just our way of like rationalizing why something happened. And it's really for us to feel good about the world. Because if you believe the world is a bad place and people are bad, we wouldn't be able to function, right? But in terms of what I found in my study, it's people who believe that only gullible people fall for scams, that scammers are always prosecuted. It's that kind of like feeling that this wouldn't happen to me because I'm smart. And B, if it happened to me, I'd be protected, I'd get my money back, where a lot of the times this is not the case.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so what are some of the persuasion techniques that the scammers are using if they, sense that someone's more impulsive or obviously pushing someone to make a decision quickly? What are some of the things that they're going to do to try to move us in a direction we don't want to go?
Yeah, like I think the biggest one really is the visceral influence, evoking a visceral influence. And those are the primal drives, such as hunger, thirst, a sexual, kind of like excitement, or just like excitement, general, very strong emotions, fear, pain can be one, so kind of really exploiting those visceral influences. And the reason why they are very, very influential is that when we are under visceral influence, we kind of temporarily lose reason, right? It's more difficult to recall any logical thinking
Hmm.
and any like advice that we might have heard, because all we're thinking about is that state we're in, right? Of excitement or fear. Or so you see a lot of phishing emails either evoke fear, like your account has been compromised, or sextortion, like you're going to be found out for whatever things you've done. And then you have excitement, right? Like greed, excitement, where hey, you want a prize, you
Hmm.
you can get a big win or something like that. A lot of them focus on that, but you also have like miracle cures that like purport to cure painful conditions or cancer, something you're afraid of that's also painful and you
Hmm.
just want to get rid of it. And I think that's the biggest one. And a lot of scams either evoke some kind of like visceral influence and then have other techniques that work in conjunction with it.
Hmm.
So, for example, a lot of the time, scarcity is another technique where they will emphasize scarcity in terms of, hey, you can't get anywhere else, or this deal expires, tomorrow. So it's kind of like for only short time. Time limits and scarcity are very, and the reason for that is because when you evoke a visceral influence, people get more impulsive in that moment.
Hmm.
But if you leave it for a day or two, it kind of goes down, you become more rational. So they pair it up with this time kind of scarcity and time, kind of like techniques to get you to act in a moment. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like they want you to be in that state where you can't, where you're focusing just on like these peripheral things rather than the real questions. So those are the frequent ones. Authority is another one. You see letters from IRS, from police, from and people generally trust the government,
Hmm.
trust the kind of people in power. You'll see a lot of the old-fashioned kind of advanced fee frauds using a pastor. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, like a position of trust, pastor, doctor, lawyers, somebody from the bank. Those are the professions we trust, right? They are in a position of like, they should be looking out for our own interest. So it's really difficult for people to think these people, but that's the authority one. Then you have social proof, right? Fake reviews, things like that, testimonials, kind of like fake testimonials on like social media, supporting these fake products and stuff like that. Because as humans, we look at others to define our reality, right?
Hmm.
And that's a big one. Really evoking social norms as well. A lot of charity scams evoke social norms. We like to feel helpful. We like to help others. We've been brought up to be helpful and kind to our friends and family. So that's exploited a lot in charity scams,
Yeah.
or when, I don't know, when a scammer hacks your Facebook account and sends emails to your friends.
Yeah, it's funny. I was last night. I was scrolling through LinkedIn because I try to avoid Facebook. I was scrolling through LinkedIn, and I didn't grab a screenshot, so I don't remember his name. But he was sharing a story of a scam that I think he was just telling it as if it had happened to him, not that it really did. But the person had received an email saying, "Hi, this is so and so from this particular law firm. Um, there has been an allegation of misconduct at your workplace, and your name got brought up. And I'd like to discuss this with you. I'd like to set up an appointment with you, a phone appointment with you a week from now." And so he's like, "Okay, it's a little bit emotional. It's scary. This sounds legal."
Mm.
And he thought, you know what? This seems a little suspicious. Let me go digging into it. And so he looks for this lawyer's website, finds the lawyer's website, and I was just kind of thinking through some of the the factors that you were talking about here, and I get like, oh, check, 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 check,
Hmm.
and he finds a page on the website where here's all the successful cases that I've won, and I got this verdict and this verdict and this verdict, and they all have an attached document. And so he ends up downloading one of the documents, and lo and behold, it was the document was malware. And it was really interesting because, in
Mm.
some sense, I could see a lot of the normal factors of a scam
Hmm.
there, but the things that people would normally say of, well, don't click on links, um, avoiding all these things. Well, he avoided all of those things,
Mm.
but they moved him off to a different platform where he did those things and ultimately downloaded an infected document. And I was like, wow, someone really went a long way to get someone to get their computer compromised, as opposed to click on this link for $1 million. But I saw there, like, there's the authority, there's the social proof, the I want to do the right thing if there's a lawsuit. It's just interesting to see all those things played out in something that I just saw the other night.
No, that's really interesting. And I've been seeing a lot more of that. I think as we're becoming a little bit more aware and we're sharing our stories and we're sharing advice, I think scammers are becoming, like they're always one step ahead. I remember somebody said to me, "Aren't you worried that your book is going to be a manual for scammers?" And I'm like, "No, because they're always one step ahead. By the time I actually can write something, it's already been done, right?" And this is a prime example, right?
Yeah,
Like I've seen a lot of newer scams. They don't have some of the same things, right? But they still need that visceral influence to
yeah,
get you going, right? But it's really interesting how, like, really, he was bargaining on the fact that this person's going to go on a website
yeah.
and check the information, because that's what we're telling people: double check, don't click anything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like it was totally exploiting all of those.
yeah.
Go to an independent source, Google, see if the lawyer is real. Oh, I found their website. It looks like it's real. And
Mm.
so it really is exploiting the things that we tell people to do to not be scammed.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting. And I wonder whether, like, I don't actually know if that exists in
Yeah.
America for lawyers, but I think really there should be a website. Like in Washington, for example, if I want to hire a contractor, I can go on a website, check their license, insurance, what they're registered to do. And I wonder whether we should really have that for every profession, because how do you know that this is not a real lawyer?
Yeah, and I think the challenges for you and me and everybody else is there probably are contractor licensing boards for X, Y, and Z, but only the contractors know about it, and the
Yeah.
lawyers who want to sue those contractors. If I'm hiring a guy to do
Mm.
plumbing work, I'm not an expert in plumbing. I'm not going to know, well, which is the right licensing board to figure out whether this is a
Yes,
legitimate
exactly.
plumber. And yeah, well, he says he has insurance, but I don't know how to
Yeah,
verify that.
I know.
All those
Exactly.
things.
Exactly. And I just wonder, like one of the things that people assume is if they have a website, it's real, but that's so easily.
Yeah, I
A good
think.
scammer, right? A good scammer will go a long way to support the story.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things that I will frequently tell people is there's lots of tools out there for you to find out how old is the website,
Mm,
and how when was the domain name first registered. And sometimes I'll have someone report a scam to me and say, "Hey, they said they've been in business for 5 years," and you go to one of these tools and look up how old the website is, and it was registered last week. And I'm like, oh, no,
mm.
no, 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 run for your life. If they say they've been around 5 years, but it's only been around a week, there's something fishy going on there. But but
Yeah.
but
Mm, I
there
know.
are definitely scammers out there that will buy old domain names, or they know they're going to be doing this 5 years from now, and so they've been registering domain names
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
over the course of
Also,
years.
I think you need to also realize that's something that came out while I was interviewing some of the fraud victims, and one of the person who bought from a fake website said to me, like in the future, I now no longer trust any small companies I don't know,
Yeah.
and it's really sad. Like she said, it's really sad because there could be some amazing new company that's popped up, so like I think the implication, right, like for the society is really big, right? Like if you're a new business you'll struggle just
Yeah.
because we have scammers. And having said that, scammers can also clone a very established business, and
Hmm.
and especially with the engine optimization, right? Like how do you ever know that the first thing that pops up is the actual thing?
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many of it. I had interviewed someone in the fraud department, the head of the fraud department at Amazon, and they have people selling counterfeit products. They work really hard to stop it, but
Yeah,
just because
it's
you go
fine.
to Amazon doesn't mean what you're buying is necessarily, you know,
Yeah,
they've got good processes for returns and all that stuff,
yeah,
but it's hard to kind of you can't just say,
I
well,
know.
don't buy
You
from a
don't
small
know.
business because that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. I
No.
did have one question about you. You had
Sure.
talked about kind of that visceral influence and us becoming excited, and that kind of shuts off one portion of the brain and turns on a different portion of the brain. Is there a way to that we in the moment have the ability to switch that back to calm ourselves down and get ourselves out of this spot where we're making emotional decisions?
I think, a lot can be said for personality. It's like if you think of a human, no human will react the same as another human because
Yeah,
it's lots of different components. So you need to kind of be thinking about, I always say like a fraud situation is it's complicated,
yeah,
it's not either or, and I don't have a specific advice. But if you think about it, right, like you're not going to be interested in everything that comes into your inbox. They have to get you at the right time.
yeah.
So, like with a job scam, you're only going to be vulnerable to a job scam when you're looking for a job and you're desperate or your finances. And then, even if you see there's something dodgy, you may not have anything to lose because you're struggling financially.
Yeah.
So, you're going to go for it anyway. So, circumstances play a big role. Personality plays a big role. Some people are just more impulsive than others. And it's the experience that teaches you to be less
Hmm.
impulsive. I mean, for majority of my life, I was a very impulsive person. But I think like learning what I've learned about scams and kind of like having that experience as years go by, accruing that life experience.
Hmm.
Maybe you have negative situations because you were impulsive, you said something you shouldn't have without thinking, you accrue life experience, right? And we are also born gullible. and we accrue life experience, we become a bit smarter, and we become a little bit more impulsive as we kind of like age too. So, it's really difficult to say, is there anything? Sure, always delay decisions. That is always the best advice I can give you. But I also understand as a psychologist that when something is your personality trait, it's very difficult to go
Yeah.
against yourself. So it's kind of like I would say, perhaps maybe make a rule. I think making a rule like, hey, I don't make decisions on a spot. So
Yeah.
whenever you're in a situation to make a decision on a spot that's financial, just say, I don't do that. Right. And like for example, there were, one time I gave a talk to like elderly group of people in my area on how to say no really at the door. And I remember, one of the people said to me, like, I just feel like I'm being rude.
Yeah.
When I say no. And I said, fine, okay, like I know this is difficult for you to then say no. Don't say no, say not right now, right? And I just said to them, look, if you have to lie and just say, hey, can you come back tomorrow when my son, who is a police detective, will be here? He'll be interested. And I said, a genuine person will come back, but the
Yeah.
scammer won't be back, right? And you're not saying no, you're just saying not right now, right?
Yeah.
And then the next day, don't open the door, or,
Yeah.
do whatever you have to. But it's sometimes really difficult, and I see a lot of simplistic advice. Just don't do it. Don't
Yeah.
click on links. You shouldn't, why are you engaging? But if you're an extrovert, you want to be talking to people who ping you on Facebook and
Yeah.
sound interesting. It's kind of like I think we give advice from our own perspective, but people are complicated and
Yeah.
come with their own circumstances, personalities, knowledge, all of that makes difference.
Yeah, I've been able to be good at it sometimes in my life on delaying decisions. I remember one time when uh, there was a car that I really wanted to buy, and I went to the dealership and I saw it, and like, yeah, that's the one that I want, and talk through things with the finance guy. And I said, well, I'll come back tomorrow and let you know. And they're like, no, 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 it might be
No,
gone. All the techniques came out,
we
and
can't we can't guarantee
I
that this
can't
deal is gonna.
guarantee it. And I'm like, you know what? It's a lot
Let
of
me talk to my
money.
manager. Maybe we can get some.
Yes, all those things came out, but I'm proud of myself. In the moment, it was like, no, I don't make decisions that are going to cost me, over
Mm.
$1,000. I just don't make those without sleeping on it. If the vehicle goes away and it's gone, that's something I'm willing to.
I'll go to another dealer.
It'll show up somewhere at some time. Like I'll be able to
Yeah,
get it from somebody
yeah,
else at some other time. But it was really hard in the moment to say,
it's
nope,
hard.
I'm just gonna leave, and once I've thought
Yep.
about it, if I still want it, I'll be back tomorrow. Give me your card, and or call me tomorrow. I'm fine with that, but I'm not
No,
gonna
and
buy it from you today.
no, and like you bring up a good point, right? These persuasion techniques have been around for centuries. Like nothing has changed. They
Yeah,
work because we're human and we're still the same humans, right? And they are used in sales and marketing. They're
yeah,
used by legitimate people, right? Like for a reason of persuasion, right? And it's just a shame that scammers are also using them. But whereas in a dealership, you walk away with a car, maybe when if you're dealing with a scammer, you wouldn't get
yeah.
that.
It's all about the intent behind the
Yeah, exactly.
transaction.
Yeah,
Obviously there are people that are going to take advantage of you when you're buying and selling cars and things like that, but in theory,
yeah,
if they're a reputable company, they're employing sales techniques, and you will get the thing that you agreed to buy. When
yeah,
it's a scammer, you're not going to get what you think you're going to get, whether
yeah,
it's a
exactly.
relationship or you've got that they've got that inside, crypto's
Yeah,
gonna bust out tomorrow, and you got this 8 hour window, and if you
yeah,
don't
yeah,
do it in
yeah,
this window, you'll miss the boat.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate
True.
when those things manipulate us. Are there are there anything else that kind of affect our minds in the midst of scams that we've missed?
I think, sure, right? Like when I think there are lots of scams that are I kind of have realized that when you groom the victim for a while, they are easier to persuade to give large sums of money.
Hmm.
And you see that like it started with romance frauds, but now like pig butchering scams are doing that. And I just analyzed like a whole year worth of conversation for a pig butchering scam. And one of the interesting things that I've noticed is that you know, like the way that they manage the victim throughout the conversation starts light and it's very, full of flattery and
Hmm.
and it's really kind of very friendly. And as they started to kind of introduce the idea of investment, they introduce it casually first, then more deliberately, and then they start persuading the victim to invest. And as the conversation progresses, you see how it's starting to turn negative, but in
Hmm.
such tiny shades. It's kind of like, I guess it's kind of similar to domestic abuse. It never starts with a like terrible thing. It
Hmm.
starts with a little bit of control and a little bit more and a little bit more, and then with a physical violence, and then with a verbal violence to physical violence. And I've noticed that pattern. And it's very important for people to know that when you're in that kind of a conversation or a relationship, I mean, you're obviously interested in this person, whether on a personal note or friendship wise, or you thinking you are getting into a partnership, business partnership. It's very important to note that there's something called the ego depletion.
Hmm.
And, like when we are exhausted from, being kind of torn down little by little, we are more likely to just comply.
Hmm.
And you see police detectives use that technique when they're interrogating people. They'll, I don't know if you're a fan of First 48, but on my first road trip to America, I watched that and I got hooked. It's kind of that kind of like going back and forth and coming and asking the same questions and stuff. And eventually the victim's just so tired, right? You
Hmm.
deplete them of kind of like their whatever defense mechanism they had is depleted. And this is where you get more compliance, and this is how fake confessions happen. And it's not dissimilar in certain scams, right? Some romance scam turned very abusive,
Hmm.
like blackmail in terms of like emotional blackmail. You don't love me if you don't comply. If you believe your family, then that means you don't love me. And then you get into that negative thing, and all you're trying to do is please this person,
Yeah.
right? And that can be very potent, and it happens in such small increments. If it happened overnight, you would realize and go, whoa, no thanks, right?
Yeah.
But it happens in such tiny increments that actually you're getting used to it little by little until you don't really notice there's anything wrong. And I think that's very, very insidious. That's very, very dark, very
Is
dark.
there a way to break that cycle? Is it by having kind of a wide range of friends and family and people that you communicate with on a regular basis that will kind of reset that what is acceptable communication and treatment?
Yeah, like I think it's difficult. I think that grooming component, right, of fraud is very very difficult to break.
Hmm.
It's something where like by the time the friends and family may notice you being abused, right, that something's wrong, that victim may already be groomed and believe that nobody would understand what's going on between them and the
Hmm.
scammer, right? Because they're talking to the love interest, and that scammer will say, well, look, nobody would understand why we want to get married so quickly, or why we're in this relationship. So it's very difficult. I
Hmm.
don't have like a specific kind of like a good advice there. But I think if you're a family member of somebody who is going through similar thing, either longer term investment scam or romance scam, coming in with as much empathy as you can master. I know
Hmm.
sometimes that's difficult. Typically the family will come in and say, don't be so stupid, like, why are you doing this? Don't give them your money, like what? But trying to really understand where the victim is at, right, I think is the best shot to actually snapping them out of it. And I do say to organizations that I worked with, and everybody, I think prevention is always better than intervention,
Yeah.
right? Talking about it, the awareness, raising awareness, how scammers affect us, and how, like, what that's going to impact, right? So like when you're in a ego depletion, right? Like when you're in that state of just like feel so negative about a situation and you're feeling guilty and stuff, and somebody's been blaming you for so many months, you know, you can't process things clearly anymore. It affects your working memory. It affects, it affects all sorts of things. It's, you can feel a little bit depressed as well, kind of like this, you enter a state where you're just not good,
Hmm.
right? So doing anything you can to actually get outside opinion on a situation helps. But again, that's really difficult when you're in the middle of
Yeah.
that. So I would say if you're a family member of somebody like that, approach them with empathy rather than kind of authority.
Hmm. My guess is in a lot of cases the the person who's doing the grooming is already telling the
Yes.
person your family's going to try to intervene. They're going to
Yes,
try to break us
exactly.
apart, and the family
Exactly.
saying those things just now affirms everything that the
Exactly.
person who was grooming said.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh,
And
that's
it's really
insidious.
difficult. It's very, very bad. Yeah.
Oh, that's awful. As we wrap up here, I know you wrote the book, Psychology of Fraud, Persuasion and Scam Techniques. Where can people find that?
I mean, it's available everywhere. My publisher is Rutledge. They're really good. They deliver for free, so you can order from them specifically. They usually have the best prices too. They offer 20-30% now and again for different things. You can get it from Amazon. It's like in most, it's online. You can order it easily.
And are you still doing research in this area? Are you still active in this space?
Yes, I'm very active. I'm still trying to, even though I work in the industry now, I'm active in writing. I write for several blogs. I also have a chapter coming out in a criminology textbook specifically on grooming.
Oh, interesting.
And kind of like, yeah, kind of like a grooming to deceive, and kind of like some of the intricacy, that comes with that grooming, and how I'm noticing, for example, sometimes the grooming may not necessarily even happen through lies. It's kind of, if you think about the Tinder swindler,
Hmm.
right? He created a lifestyle that persuaded
Yeah.
victims without him even having to say anything. So it's kind of like there are very sophisticated scammers that, plan this very well. So that's coming out hopefully sometimes this year, pretty soon. I think I was told around April, maybe. That's going in the kind of criminology textbook, but, will be available too. So yeah,
Great.
I write all the time.
And if people want to find out where you're writing, how can they find out?
Yeah, that's a good point. I write a lot of stuff for a State of Security blog, which is a blog by a company called Tripwire that I worked
Mhm.
for. I still write a lot of stuff for them. I do have a website. I don't always update everything that I've written for different organizations and stuff, but I'm gonna be better at it. So my website does list a lot of articles that I've written, and it does list my book, and I'm going to list the textbook, and I'm hoping to publish some of the results of the analysis of the pig butchering scams too.
And what is the website?
Oh, it's just Martina Dove.
That's
Yeah,
easy.
.com.
That's
Yeah, it's
convenient.
easy.
It's
Very
nice when you
easy.
have a unique name and you thought about buying the domain
Yeah.
name. Unfortunately, my
Yeah.
name's too common.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It is what it is. Martina, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
You're welcome. It was fun.